Well, this is a big one. Welcome to episode 77 with Jeremy Griffith. You're probably already following him on Instagram at Los Angelos, and he is amazing. His Instagram is awesome, and his story is even cooler. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to remind you to go check out 4gigsin4days.com. Starting October 3rd, I'm going to teach you totally for free how to book 4 gigs in 4 days. So go sign up there if you want to learn how to do it. It's totally free. It's going to be really fun. We're all going to be doing it together. Otherwise, here is, I think, one of the coolest episodes that we've ever recorded with Jeremy Griffith. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with someone who I've been very excited to bring on the podcast for a little while. I'm following him on Instagram. I know that you're following him on Instagram too. I'm sure you've seen one of his many releases, BC Shuffle with Lost Art Magic, or the Instagram sessions from Illusionist, which is just awesome. He has released 2 decks of cards. And I'm just really excited to dive in and talk about his world in Magic. Here he is, Jeremy Griffith. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
We're doing extremely well.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful day here in Toronto, and we have over and over again, month over month, fallen more and more in love with Instagram. So I'm so excited to just talk a little bit of either strategies or just ideas, history, everything about how you've made that platform your own, so much so that you've released things about what you've been doing on Instagram. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into Magic? What was your journey like?
I started young, sort of the quintessential got the Magic set from a family member.
Yep.
I want to say it was my Uncle Roy got me a Mark Wilson's complete course in Magic, but it was like the kit with all the like chintzy like plastic props and everything.
My favorite.
Yeah, right. That's I was terrible at reading, so I carried that massive book around with me everywhere, just looking at the pictures. And then my dad, who incidentally used to be a magician's assistant when he was a teenager, finally decided to like get me into like my first Magic like class, and it was done by a magician at like the local library, and then I was hooked. It was done. And so I kept with it. When I was in junior high, my science teacher was a magician, Kevin Papke. Guy got me started, carried me through all the way into my teens. He got me into Magic Camp, Dave Goodsell's West Coast Wizards Magic Camp.
Awesome.
Out there in Idlewild, California. And I did that for 4 years all through high school. When I first got into high school, I became a junior member of the Magic Castle out here in Hollywood.
Incredible.
And then from there, I dropped off a little bit when I got into college, just a little too much to focus on to do Magic. But up until then, I was doing, restaurant Magic pretty consistently, street Magic. That had gotten popular, so it made it sort of easy to get into that. And then kind of dropped off until I turned, I want to say 30. I got back into it, and Instagram was sort of a gateway for doing that.
And what are you doing now? Do you Magic full-time, part-time?
Actually, it's funny. I actually have very little skin in the game professionally. I do this mainly through Instagram, but I have a number of friends who do it professionally. So if you notice, there's a good number of things that I promote on my Instagram. Usually it's decks of cards. I'm sort of mono-themed that way.
Yep.
But then I also like build out other people's Instagrams. If there's someone doing something really intriguing, I try to point, all the people who follow me toward them.
Yeah, like a really cool Magic podcast or something like that.
Yeah. Like if I knew some people were doing a podcast about Magic, I might do that.
That'd be an interesting twist. So what do you do? What do you do professionally?
So professionally, my twin brother and I run the family software company. So it was started by our father, and then when he passed away, my twin brother and I inherited it. My twin is the heir apparent. He's the one who kind of grew the business and made it what it is today. And then I sort of took a supporting role, which enabled me to kind of do all the Magic stuff that I do now.
Mm-hmm. And what, just out of interest, what sort of software is it?
Oh, it's very sexy software. It's Telnet emulation software, which I know. Try to control your excitement. It's really no. It's a piece of software that's designed to support a very, very old software protocol, and we sort of made a sexy kind of interface for it. And using a lot of the information that we've done, we're now sort of pushing into the analytics space, and it's really intriguing what it's capable of, even though it's built on such an old technology.
So most of your day-to-day, is it in like coding and design, or is it in like business management?
It's a lot of business management, and I actually specialize in quality assurance, which means I break this stuff for a living. So I kind of get to play like excited 3-year-old all day long.
Yeah, you get to say like, how can I mess with this, and then report that I was able to mess with it.
Yeah, my programmers are just, they love what I do. They just, they come out and they're like, we found this great feature, and then I come in and I was like, well, what if...
Like, time to break it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I basically come in and I'm like, why didn't we think of this? They're like, oh, we so appreciate you, Jeremy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's dive in and talk a little bit about Instagram.
Okay.
A lot of, basically, if you're any person under the age of 19, and they'll all email me and tell me that I'm wrong, all 2 of them, but your dream is to become an Instagram influencer or a YouTuber, right? Like, it's kind of like the 2017, 2018 version of fame. And I know 2 people will email me and tell me that's not true for them, but for the rest of them, that's basically what everyone wants to be.
Right.
So
Content creator.
A content creator, exactly.
Right.
So, in a nutshell, what does it take? What does it take for people to start recognizing you through your Instagram and get noticed, get follows?
Okay, so I've tasted a bit of this, and I've watched people who started at the same time as me, blow up far faster, and I've had this conversation with them. And the one thing that we've all agreed on is consistency, right? That you can't let up. You can't just disappear for a month and expect everyone to kind of like remember who you were and what you were doing.
Yeah.
The other thing is that you don't get to let up on your own creativity. You don't get to rest on your laurels and just say, oh, I'll just keep doing this thing over and over and over again, and people will always love it and always be interested in it. So I think it's actually what you shouldn't do more than what you should. I think that you shouldn't let up in terms of interacting with the people who are following you, and you shouldn't let up on yourself in terms of saying, "Oh, I've got this figured out," because chances are you don't. The whole social media aspect changes so quickly, and the attention span is so very, very small that you really do. You have to kind of always come up with something different, something new, and chase it. You need to keep interacting with it. I was telling someone a couple years back, that you cannot discount the advantage of fidgeting. That you just keep sort of like tweaking and messing around with these small things. Like for me, it started off with flotation photography. Right, I had this rule. Right, when I was doing my photography, it was all playing cards, and they were always like levitating or balancing and stuff like that. And my rule was no Photoshop. Right, I had to figure out a way to do it using just a couple rules. Right, there were no invisible elements, no invisible thread, no Saran wrap, no anything like that, no glass. There was no adhesive, so I couldn't use tape or glue or anything like that. And that anything that you saw in the picture was what was used to create the picture. So if all you saw was, cards and a table, that was all that was used, right? And there was no like filtering, right? The only thing that I was allowed to use was the filters provided by Instagram. So I wanted to create all of this stuff, and using those rules, even though, yes, you could very easily take those photos and then Photoshop out whatever you needed, I wanted to take the challenge and see how far I could take it. And I thought it was going to be ignored. I thought that it was honestly going to be something that didn't really catch on because there was that option. But it did. I told people the rules that I was following, and then I taught a couple of people what I was doing, and then they started doing it, and that kick-started me. And then it became, okay, well, I've been doing cards for the better part of 15 years specifically, and then in general for the past 27. So, why don't I see what I can do? And 15 seconds doesn't give you a lot to work with.
Not a lot of time.
No. So everything that you do has to be flashy. It has to be fast, but it has to have enough of an impact that people, not only interact with that video, but maybe go searching through what else you do. And then also maybe, choose to follow you because they want to see what else you can come up with. So, I think those are the 2 points, right? Consistent interaction, and then also seeing how creative you can get. And not everything hits. There's some stuff that I thought, oh my gosh, this is a winner, right? This is going to be the thing that makes my day. And then I got nothing. And then the weirdest thing, like the one thing that got 100,000 views on my Instagram was just me spreading the cards. It was just a compilation video of me doing like weird, ribbon spreads and then, finding interesting ways to close them up. And that one was the one that was the winner. I was like, this social media game is totally unpredictable. I'm going home, So
it's awesome that part of the equation that you mentioned is just not phoning in the creativity, right? Like it seems like everyone's advice is just the technical advice, post every day, like 5 hashtags or whatever, like don't forget the hashtag, like similar people, comment on whatever, but just saying stick to great quality, and what's good now, what's working right now on Instagram might not be working in 3 months or 6 months. And you sort of to play with what's working.
Right. Well, and okay, so this is the other thing that you need to consider is that if you are going to invest heavily in Instagram, Instagram is a very, very cool and interactive and simple platform, right? There's not a lot that you have to consider, far less than Facebook, right? Far less than YouTube. What do you have? You've got pictures and videos, and then you've got the description, you've got hashtags, and you have stories, right? And that's
now location. But other than that,
that's really all you have to deal with, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Meanwhile, if you're on Facebook, right, you've got groups, you've got advertisements,
and
videos,
and
so many things, right?
Yeah.
But the one of the downfalls of that, right, is that much like Facebook, Instagram is not evergreen, right? People very rarely do people see posts that I did from 2 years ago. Meanwhile, if you're on YouTube, a lot of those videos keep coming up. I've got a couple of friends, right? Chris Ramsey and Asad Chaudhry, right? These guys, created massive followings on and Peter McKinnon, right? These guys just, they blow up and they create these huge followings, and they are consistently getting interactions with content that they created, well over a year ago.
Right, because that YouTube content never dies.
Precisely. So if you are going to be an influencer, I would honestly recommend you don't do something that I chose. I chose to stick mainly on Instagram because it was something that I could keep up with while maintaining my professional life, right?
Yeah. So if you were to start fresh and do it again, would you focus on YouTube just because of everything you learned? Or would you stay to Instagram just because, 30 seconds, a minute is enough for you to be confident in the quality?
I think I would probably make the exact same decision. For me, I've got a whole, like I said, I don't have a dog in this fight, right? I'm not a professional magician anymore. I perform for friends and family and by referral, but I'm not consistently out there trying to get gigs. I'm not trying to consistently produce content that can be sold through major magic companies. All of my friends are, right? And the nice part is that I can have my professional world and I can have my social media world, and nary the two shall meet, right? I'm okay with this level of interaction. If I had to do YouTube as well, to be serious about YouTube, that is a full professional investment. Especially if you're trying to become an influencer. If you're not already an influencer, the nice part is a lot of us, we had some platform, and then when we moved over to another platform, a lot of that carried forward. When I finally got on Facebook like a year ago, a lot of the people who knew me from Instagram carried over into Facebook, right? But it took that initial investment. Same thing with Ramsey. Ramsey started on Instagram, and when he really got going on YouTube, there were those people who were on both who knew to follow him because he already had exceptional content on Instagram.
That's awesome advice, and I think just insight from someone watching it happen to say, like, if you're here for longevity, YouTube might be the better bet. But if you're here for maybe just like the fun and interaction of it all, maybe Instagram might be a better bet, or double down on Instagram to get in terms of an influencer. But definitely it might be harder because your content will disappear and you're competing with just one feed, one image at a time you're competing with, versus on YouTube there's like 9 other, it's promoting you at the side to click on 9 other videos. When the video ends, it tells you 4 other videos. There's a homepage with recommended videos for you.
Right. And they've had so long to develop that there's all of these avenues that you could go. And this is the paradox of choice, right? Because you could do anything, it's hard to do something in specific, just because where do you start? And if you ever run into that, I would say start and then figure it out as you go. This whole Instagram game, I really got started on it when you could first upload videos, and there was probably about 30 of us that really, really carried it forward. We were all jamming with each other. It was like pass the change or pass the balance or whatever, and we'd hopscotch all over the world. Someone would do a change in Czechoslovakia and pass it to someone in Iran, who would pass it to me, and I'd pass it to someone in Canada and then to New York. And those people who really stuck with it, who wouldn't give up when you got past something, you'd really go for it. Those are all the people who are the influencers on Instagram as far as the magic world.
And it's interesting that it's sort of like the originals, right? The people who weren't afraid to do it when it was just they just made videos on Instagram. So whoever that was doing it was definitely a pioneer of the field. So just goes to tell you that when they launch something new, like Instagram stories or whatever the case may be, being a pioneer might pay off in the long run.
Yes.
To collect those followers. I want to transition to talk a little bit about some of the products that you've made, but I love the idea of the Instagram sessions that you released with Illusionist. And the reason I think it's so cool is because we have officially transformed into people actually wanting to do magic for the internet, right? Like, there's products being sold where the old Jimmy the magician can no longer say, well, how is that going to help you in the real world? This isn't for the real world. This is for online and internet, and this is what it's birthed from. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So here's sort of the misnomer that I think, when people first approach doing magic on the internet, there's a misnomer that says, oh, it's easier. And the truth is, it isn't. There's already a stigma working against you, right? Mm-hmm. The technology has advanced far enough that people can very rightly guess that you did that through editing. And there are plenty of people who are quote unquote, social media magicians where that's the effect. Is that there's
I'm joking.
But even before him, right? There were plenty of people where all of a sudden
there's plenty of people that
they're
it's
like
just
pulling a
editing
baguette out of their hands,
and
that's not
exactly.
That's excellent effects, but that's not magic, right? Yeah. There's a guy, Kim something. His name always escapes me, but he looks like Gandalf, right? And I was at Magic Con. The last one that was held by the Buck Twins. And he made up an exceptional point, right? I want to say it was Asimov who said that any sufficiently advanced form of technology is indistinguishable from magic. But he used the contrapositive, right? He said, if what you are doing is indistinguishable from technology, then what you are doing is not sufficiently magical.
Right.
Right? So if the effect that you're doing cannot immediately be explained away by technology, then you've got it. Then you've got a little piece of it, right? A lot of what I do, right? The stuff that I do, like ditching.
Oh, that's
everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, I really like that.
Well, okay, all right, so I ran into this problem right out the gate, right? When I was doing the flotation photography, it's easily explained away by, technology. right? If you're good enough in Photoshop, right? Even if you did a video, if you're good enough, you can still do something with it. I'm not advanced enough to do that, so I had to do it old school and then figure it out. But it took a lot to sort of gain people's trust enough so that when I said, look, this isn't me doing, trickery technology-wise, this is actually just me trying to do something magic related. It took a lot to gain that trust. But once you have it, you cannot spoil it. If you spoil it even a bit, you're in trouble, right? The guy who did the polyglot, he was like the, fluent in 3 months guy, where he spoke like 19 languages. He made this mistake, right? For April Fools, he said, oh, no, just kidding. We're actually reading from scripts and everything. And he tried to, make a joke out of it, but he destroyed people's trust in him. And then he kind of like had to rebuild his business from scratch. Wow. The same thing exists in magic, right? If in any way, shape, or form, people think that you're faking it, right? Mm-hmm. You lose all sense of trust, right? And people are smart enough now on social media to go, okay, this isn't worth it, right?
So are you talking magician to magician, or are you talking magician to lay people?
I'm talking in general. I think, okay, so it's much, much more well-defined as magician to magician, right? We're looking at each other and we're critiquing each other, but we're terrible at being muggles, right? We will always be wizards, Harry. That's just the way we're going to function, right? When we look at something, we will never be able to look at it without somehow thinking of the method, because we know the method. It's like when you're reading words, there's no part in your brain that will look at letters and see them as squiggles anymore, because now you know they're letters and they will always form words and sentences. Same thing in magic. You're always going to look at a piece of magic and there's a part of you that's always thinking method. So magicians are actually terrible when it comes to reviewing magic, but regular lay people are probably the best because they're not looking at the method. They're looking at the outcome. They're looking at the story. They're looking at, even if unconsciously. And if there's a part of them that goes, well, this is just, like a Pepsi commercial with good editing, then it's not magic to them. They may
one of the things, go ahead.
Oh, I was like, they may applaud, but they're not mystified,
Right.
So
it's sort of like a performance, it's not magic, but it's the theater of magic without the actual magic itself.
Right. And probably even one more layer removed, even theater, right? Exactly. Othello, people are dying and you might actually feel for them, right? Whereas this is more like the intermission and someone's up on stage, Anyway.
One of the things that I liked that you said about the contrapositive of doing magic online in terms of, or on a camera, in terms of playing against the editing, is showing that if it's not technology, or if it exceeds technology, what we know technology can do, then it must be magic. And I think that is a good motto, mantra, or whatever the case may be for somebody producing stuff online, just to say, how can this be so clearly not editing, right? Like, that's almost the question that we need to answer when producing things online. Not only is this fooling, but is this fooling knowing that the audience could know that I could edit in Photoshop? So how do I prove that I don't, right? So it's a really, really interesting starting place to just say that, like, we're not trying to prove that we can do something impossible. We're trying to prove both that we can do something impossible and that we can do something impossible by all means of editing, photo, anything of that nature.
True, and that also, okay, so you've got the issue of technology, so that's one barrier, but that also, I think they call this R sectioning and K sectioning, right? The difference between like the way mammals. Okay, so again, this is going to sound weird, but I've brought this point up before. So the way that like mammals versus insects, right, they procreate, right? Mammals, it's a few children that they invest their whole world into. And then insects, it's thousands of children that they invest very little in, right? So what I think people should do is the former, right? I think that people should pick one and run with it, right? I definitely think that you shouldn't just splatter everything out there and see what sticks and then just keep doing that. Because eventually no one will know what to expect from you, and eventually they won't expect anything, right? But let's say we're talking about the whole technology aspect. If that's the barrier, then it means that maybe the thing that you should be chasing has very little to do with necessarily the visual illusion, because that's honestly what the technology helps most with, is the visual aspect of it, and go more for the emotional, go more for the experiential. And this is where I think the biggest argument is right now, right? I'm watching this go down through, all this.
It's going down a lot, like sort of just to put context to people listening, we're basically recording this the day that this whole Jabrizi thing is going down. So yeah, we are sort of watching this conversation about magic and technology overlap happening live. And just for the people who, I have no idea when this is going to come out, so just for the people listening, this whole debacle is that there's a video of Jabrizi basically walking through some guess as to how they're going to react and how they're going to pretend that the magic is happening and react in a certain way. So a lot of magicians are weighing in. Most of them I think are weighing in on the negative side. Mm-hmm. I don't really know how I feel about it because it's tough as to where we draw the line, but I just wanted to add some context. So continue. What's your thought on it?
All right. So I think if you manipulate that, then the only thing that you're doing is setting up one more hurdle that the budding magician has to overcome. That you now, not only have you lost trust,
it affects everybody.
Yeah, you not only have broken the trust of the visual aspect using technology or something like that, and I'm not saying someone's doing that, but if you do that, and then also they can't trust the reactions of the people that you're supposed to be doing this with, so they can't even empathize with the people who are watching the magic, you've now lost that trust too. So now where does someone turn? You're slowly peeling away, the parts that people can invest in and have their users, their followers interact with and care about. So from a very, high level philosophical, not professional aspect, I feel like it's very slowly kind of peeling away at what magic could be in video, in social media. I see these two, very engaging, right? I watch Jabrizi, and then I watch, like my friend David Bonfadini, the Magic Crasher, right?
Yep.
I watch both of them, and I watch David trying to build up magic. I watch that guy constantly working every single day, coming up with new content, finding ways to take magic outside of the magic world into like the regular world. And there's no coaching. He goes after it, right? Whereas if you're coaching your audience, you're doing exactly what they do on every other TV show, right? Where everyone's standing and clapping. Well, that happened 20 minutes ago, and they splice that in whenever they want, right? That's not magic. That's TV, right? And that may make for good TV, but that's a completely different form of entertainment, right? So I get very heady and philosophical about this, and I don't mean to, but
no, it's important that we talk about it sort of in a philosophical lens as well as the down to earth lens of like what it really means day to day for a magician. I read an argument somewhere, I don't remember who said it, that we shouldn't be worrying ourselves about people comparing magic they see on video with magic they see in person, because everyone knows that they're totally different. But I can say, people ask me questions about Chris Angel. They ask me questions about, just an example, about like David Blaine. And often what I say to them and I'm not saying David Blaine doesn't use like editing, or as far as I know, definitely not in the Jabrizi sense. But what I say to them is that I'm like, there is a team of producers and a team of magic creators, and those people are absolutely amazing that allow them and help them to do that. However, if they start comparing me to Jabrizi, or they start comparing me to somebody who's not doing what they're claiming to be doing, or using editing, or using, if someone says to me like, hey, can you pull a baguette out of thin air in your hands? Like, what is it? What do I even say to those people? And I don't think that everybody knows that that's video and things real. I think like the line
people bring
is
up
being
that baguette
blurred.
thing all the time, and it's like I don't even want to tell them, hey, that video's fake. Like, what benefit does that do them or me, right? Like,
and that's the argument. There's actually there's a funny like comic, right? And it's all these people, they're watching this video. I think it's Artist Loading who did this, right? It's all these people, they're watching this video, and this guy comes up behind them, and he's like, that's fake, right? And all of them just look distraught and disheartened. And they're like, really? And he's like, yeah. And then it just pans away from them into him, and he's got this smug smirk on his face, and he just says, I'm a goddamn hero. You know, like, you know, like, do you really want to be that guy? Like, someone is enjoying it.
Right,
I can't, you know, I can't fault them for enjoying it.
No, and I'm not advocating for spoiling it. I'm sort of questioning, like, what do we non-camera editors do in this world where we're being compared with these people who have infinity at their fingertips?
Right. Well, okay. So Elliot Terrell and I we've discussed this kind of at length, right? And the truth is that we are responsible for sort of not only maintaining, right, what magic is to people, but also sort of raising the bar of it. And yes, I don't think we're ever going to be able to play on that level. Like, I'm never going to sit down and think to myself, okay, how can I pull out a baguette out of thin air so that way someone could like eat it in front of me in a believable fashion, so that way I can finally be on the same level as as that YouTuber that everyone's talking about. I don't bother, right? The truth is that I'm a pure sleight guy, right? If you met me, I'm carrying a deck of cards everywhere with me. I love the world of sleight of hand, so I focus on that. So when someone meets me, they're like, oh, hey, can you do coin tricks? Yes, I can. I don't, right? I can, but my whole world revolves around sleight of hand with cards. And doing that, just focusing on that thing that I love, that thing that I enjoy doing most, has allowed me to travel the world. You know, it's allowed me to make multiple releases, even though I didn't have to pitch it, right? It's allowed me to make a deck I dedicated to my family, right? It allowed me to release a deck with one of the largest magic companies in the world, all because I focused on doing that thing that I loved, and I engaged with the people who enjoyed it on a regular basis. And I never tried to belittle anybody. I never said to myself, okay, these people are too small and puny for me to respond to. You know, I don't get everybody. I'm not, you know, I get a lot of comments and a lot of messages, but I can't respond to everybody, but I try. But in doing that, it opened a whole world. I've got friends now in countries I've never been to, you know.
Right. Come to Toronto. We got you covered.
Good looking out. Thank you. I'm hoping I can stay on your couch. That's really all I'm asking for. No, but you know, all of it came from focusing on the thing that I love doing. And it's funny, in doing that, I never have to deal with, so do you have like a bunch of people who react? Because I don't know if you've noticed, like all my videos, it's literally just me at what used to be my dining room table in a close-up.
Yeah, there's no one reacting.
Yeah, there's literally, it's just, you know, you, me, and the card table. That's it. But that's worked. You know, it's not, you don't have to go down this road because it's popular. I think in a lot of cases, we've all had this, right? If you've ever done magic professionally in any way, shape, or form, even if you haven't done it professionally, you have this moment with someone where you nailed it, right? Where someone is sharing this magical, whimsical moment with you, right? You're on platform 9 3/4 and both of you are running through the wall. Like, it's just this moment where everyone is amazed, even you, because you helped create this magical moment. And that is the Ferrari of experience. Right. And that's the thing you should be chasing instead of trying to throw a body kit on a Pinto and trying to sell it as a Ferrari.
Beautiful. Beautifully said that, you know, not only us, but especially us working magicians know that that's what we're chasing. Not a million views, not a billion views, not a trillion views, you know, just that moment. And instead of, you know, the same way that businesses get in trouble because, you know, one is cheaper than the next and the other one's cheaper than the other, this fight to the bottom, you know, we don't need this fight to like lunacy or this fight to impossibility. We're really hoping for the moment. And I think that's a really, really good approach. That for us live magicians, we're looking for that moment. Maybe for someone online, they're looking for a number, maybe, or.
And if you are looking for that number, I think, you know, it's more power to you on how you achieve that.
Yeah.
The only thing is, I don't think we should be faking that moment that the live guys are trying to achieve, right? Like I feel like that takes away from the live performer's abilities to create that moment. Something I wanted to ask you about, speaking of all the opportunities that Instagram has allowed you to, or given you, I should say. I want to talk a little bit about endorsement and sort of specifically how you got into this world of endorsing and even designing playing cards through the connections you made on Instagram.
Okay. So first and foremost, I am totally independent, right? This is something that I've done. I made the decision a while ago. Like I said, I've got a whole professional world. I didn't want to have to set up a full second one. And I'm kind of a purist, right? I always worried that like if I ever accepted like monetary compensation for my posts, that it would really kind of destroy the trust that I spent the past 4 years developing.
Same idea as the building the trust of not using editing is building the trust of saying like, these are tools I really use. These are tools I really use. Okay, this person's paying me to say it.
Precisely. Right. Yeah. And that's okay. Again, there's a good and a bad. The good is, I fought for this. Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose in terms of like the social argument about it. But it's great because it means that when I post something, I've got a clear conscience. I didn't feel like I tried to sell out on my recommending something I don't actually like because I want a few extra bucks, right? This is not to say that someone shouldn't take endorsements. This isn't. What I would say is if you are going to do endorsements, do something with something you already love. Approach the people who make the thing that you love and ask if you can help promote it, right? That I've definitely, done that. I've gotten plenty of free cards in my world because I love those cards and I loved using them. But then again, it's an honest, sincere promotion of something I already love. The only difference is I got free cards out of this stuff,
Right.
But, if you are going to promote stuff, use it. Use this. I've got people who make incredible decks, right? I like the video I just did was using Andre's butterfly deck. And I think that is easily one of the most innovative decks made in the past 20 years. Easily, right? But I also use it on the regular with manipulation, and people don't see that, right? They see the intriguing performance aspect of it,
with that deck.
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's also a great deck of cards, right?
Yeah.
So also I get a lot of people who create decks where I can tell either A, it's their first shot at it, right?
Yep.
Or it's something that I can't really get behind, right? Say the theme is something like derogatory, or say like the aspects of it don't interest me enough, then you got to make the choice. That's sort of the hard thing. Like, dude, I love you. I know that you're trying hard. I can't promote this because either A, I don't agree with it, or B, it doesn't live up to the things that I love most.
One of the lessons that I learned first in this podcast is actually, when we first launched it, I had this whole affiliate thing, which was that I got like a certain percentage when people bought certain things, certain books that I was promoting. And I absolutely love the books and stuff like that. But there just came a time when I just went, screw this. Like, this is crazy. Like, let me just, enough of this. So we've never had any sponsors on the whole podcast. And I don't plan on it really, unless something changes my mind drastically. But I don't really think so. I don't plan on having any sponsors on the podcast, because of exactly the reason that you're saying. Someone saying that they advocate for something says a lot. And I definitely don't want to advocate for something and realize that I didn't mean it, or realize that it's for a payout. And the other thing is, by not asking for these things in return, you're just giving. You're just giving in this world, giving and giving and giving, which means that things are going to come back. They come back to you. And especially like in your situation, if you're not relying on it, especially for income, you can just give. You can give to the world of Magic, know that it's going to come back on its schedule. You don't post someone's deck and then message them and say, what can you do for me? Nothing like that. But if there's somebody at home who like is obsessed with this idea of like sponsorship and anything like that, first make sure that you can, deliver value and give, first make sure that people value the things that you're posting and sharing, and, and then worry about how to do it in exchange for money, if that's the case may be. But just focus on being valuable, and that's what we decided to focus on the podcast. I know this was a little bit of a tangent, but the idea of like sponsorship and stuff like that on a channel really resonated with me, and I just wanted to share the podcast approach.
Well, but that makes sense, and that also brings up the opposite side, right? Mm-hmm. If you are not being sponsored, right, it means that you are not necessarily being promoted by the people who would have sponsored you. For instance, one of the largest things that I ever got to do was I had the opportunity to work with Illusionist, right? With Brad Christian and his whole team there. And it was amazing. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And in a sense, they very much did sponsor my Magic career, because they released, a whole thing on Magic Stream with me. They released a deck of cards. All of this stuff was very impressive in what they were able to do. But the thing is that I was already enamored with Illusionist. They gave me one of my first breaks, and they helped promote me just out of the goodness of their hearts back when I first got started on Instagram. So for me, this was mutually beneficial. I didn't really have an issue doing it. And a lot of the people who I got to meet through Illusionist showed me that it is possible to do, this sort of sponsored Magic world correctly. And I've watched a lot of people do this, and I've watched them be hugely successful, far bigger than I've ever been, right? And they've done it well. I think if you are going to go down the road of sponsorship, first off, like you said, find a way to be valuable in and of yourself, right? How to be intrinsically valuable. I think you should chase that anyway. But then if you are going to go down the sponsored road, find a way to do it well. Find a way that doesn't diminish your intrinsic value, that doesn't diminish you in such a sense that like whatever you're sponsoring gets all the value out of it, and you're sucked dry, trying to rebuild your reputation with your own followers, because there are companies out there that will try to do that. They will have no problem, saying, oh, do all these posts and we'll do this and we'll, we want this from you and all that. And you diminish your brand.
They've siphoned off your audience, basically.
Yeah, they've diminished your brand to, make a couple extra sales that season. That's, for me, that gains nothing for anybody. Those sales will be gone. So.
Yeah. So I think that's really good to hear. And, there's nothing against sponsorship. People have done incredibly well with it. But just, really keeping in mind who and what you promote for, and as well as, like we were mentioning before in terms of Instagram, which is what it is that you stand for. That was really in the world of authentic Magic and inauthentic, I guess, what you would call it.
Right.
But what you would stand for, I think really consistency has a really, really big part in this. One of the other things I wanted to ask is about the decks of cards that you have produced. You've put out 2 different decks of cards, one which is up for some awards, which I'd love for you to talk about, and the other which you sort of described as your baby.
Yeah.
And I think that's awesome that we just interviewed Zach Mirza, who also, everyone seems to feel that the deck of cards that they put their heart into is like a child. It's a big project. So I just want to hear a little bit about what producing those was like, and a little bit about those decks of cards.
Okay. All right. So Vitreous was a labor of love. It was a deck that I produced sort of in honor of my dad, but also for my family. And that one was very, very, very personal. I designed the deck. At the time, Adrian Valenzuela had approached me about doing a design, and I hadn't even really thought about doing a deck until he had approached me about doing it. And so we worked for a good long while on creating this deck that was based on stained glass, right? That's where the word vitreous comes from. Vitreous just means like glass, right? But I had trained in theology for a really long while. And so I wanted sort of something that spoke of me, also spoke of my dad. My dad's face is on the King of Hearts. Nice. And then sort of spoke of the places where I found peace, right? So oddly enough, that the back design is based on the stained glass from a cathedral that I went to in Nantes, France. Through Instagram, I met a bunch of guys in France. One of them, Benoit, Rob, Fabian, and then I also met Thomas Lavati. And all these guys, we all just one day decided to meet up in France. And it was my first time to Europe. I was terrified, and these guys made me feel at home. And I felt like I had family in Europe for the first time. It was really good.
That's awesome.
And so they took me to all of these cathedrals in Nantes that are just, they're there. Over here, I'm in California. The oldest thing we have is like 100 years old, and now it's a car park. Meanwhile, over there, they've got like, our cafe is 500 years old. That's like a normal thing for them. So I found all these beautiful sights, and I took all these wonderful pictures, and so did they, and they sent them to me. And so that deck kind of, encapsulated where my world was at the time. And then Ryan Edwards, right, from RE Handcrafted, approached me about actually making the deck a reality. And he worked with Bill Kalush, an expert playing card company. I got some advice from Chris Chelko from the card catalog, right? He created the Whispering Imps deck, and the box that he used is the same style of tuck that I used when I did my private reserves. So we created the private reserves for my family and friends and a few went to Ryan, and then those would never be for sale, right? Those would only be available on our terms, right? But never for monetary. And then there's the regular version, and the only difference is that in the private reserves, all of the cards had foil on them. So all of the backs, the center disc had foil. So that was cool. I got to give those out, a brick to everyone in my family. And it was sort of just a nice way to remember my dad. And that is actually up, 52 plus jokers. That's, a playing card collectors society. That's up for, it's nominated for an award, which we just found out. So I wish I could give you more details, but it's been nominated. I'll let you know how it goes once I know. Then the other deck was the Royal Reserves. And that was based on the Republic number 2 deck, right? This was the first deck that I was super enamored with, right? When I really got going into Magic. I got this deck, and I was, for some reason, I just loved it. I bought every last, deck I could get off their site. And then when it went out, I started buying it off of people who had it. So now actually the stock that I have was given to me by Scott, Card Stories. He's like a championship card stacker. Yeah. He gave me a huge brick of them just out of the kindness of his heart. So that's the last stack. But I wanted to recreate it. And I tried to do it once with Illusionist, I want to say a couple years back. And it was bad timing. The world was kind of saturated with playing cards, and it wasn't a good time to come out with that deck. But then through the help of Daniel Madison, through the help of Peter McKinnon, Chris Ramsey, these guys really, really wanted to, make it happen. And so the designer, Mike Clark, and Garrett Clark put in a lot of work with me on creating this deck, on making the tuck. That one was done through Close Street Press down in San Diego. The same guys who do all the tucks for the Buck Twins. They were hugely helpful in setting all that up. And so this whole deck was, it has my name on it, but the truth is you could put 12 names on the back, and all of them would share equally in the credit. And a lot of people don't know this. I created a marking system on the deck. So that one I put juice lines into it. So that way when you're looking at the backs, you can read it from like 15 feet away. So that way you'd know like the areas, because I was sort of obsessed with blackjack for a long time. So it's the counting system you would use in blackjack, the high-low counting system.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun seeing that come to fruition. And then that was cool because, so funny story. I'm in Europe, I'm on my honeymoon with my wife, and we're out there, and we're actually in Cardiff. I'm staying with Garrett, right, from Illusionist. Yeah. And we're out there, and they're like, okay, well, we have this opportunity to shoot the trailer for your deck. And, I'm thinking, well, we're on our honeymoon and everything. I'm like, oh, this is not going to go over well. This is like working on your honeymoon. And Garrett goes, oh, by the way, we're actually going to give your wife a spa day in Miskin Manor while you film your trailer. And now I'm thinking you guys love me and just want me to be happy.
Like, perfect.
I'm like, and my wife is like, okay, honey, go to work, kisses me on the cheek and runs off. And funny story, right? The trailer for that, we were originally filming in Cardiff Bay, and my wife finishes up with her whole, spa day and goes, we're in a manor. You guys should probably like come up here and film up here. And so we're like, you're absolutely right. Dealer's choice. So we go up there. So we're actually filming at the place where the spa was that my wife got her like spa day. So,
oh my gosh, that is so funny. Yeah. And both as a story and just, it's just really cool to know that both of these decks seem like fun projects that you wanted to be a part of and sort of come to fruition, that go from sort of your mind and your experiences all the way to your fingertips. And it's just really cool to see that happen. And we've explored chatting with a lot of magicians who have, brought cards into reality. And it's just such a cool thing, to see make its way out. Yeah. And just really, really awesome. And it makes me think of, the podcast. Just one of the things that we talk about on this is, Tyler and I sit here and we go, what if we have this person on and we talk about this and we do this, and then 4 or 5 days later, it's a reality, right? Mm-hmm. And we're like, wow, I can't believe that thing that was just in our mind is reality. And how much more that can be with a deck of cards where, first of all, it doesn't take a week or 2 weeks. It takes months, years. Yeah. Exactly. Then it also takes multiple people doing multiple things, different videos, different shootings. So just a beautiful example. In Magic, we see our, something which started as we read it in a book, then it made its way to our brains, and we did it as a trick, and then what it is at the end is nothing like it was at the beginning. And it's fun to see that in podcasts and in projects like making a deck of cards. Right. So that is really, really cool. Really cool to see happen.
Well, and I think this sort of points to a very, very important lesson that I had to pick up early. I'm sure you guys have had to pick this up, which is no one does it alone. No one. I have very few people. I maybe have one really strong counterexample to this, but very few people lone wolf it very well. And even the people who lone wolf it are still dependent on the people who watch or who buy their products. So, respect the world that you live in enough to acknowledge the people who helped you. Even if that's just your customers, if it's just your followers, do not neglect them,
And it comes down to a lot of the things that we've been talking about here in terms of strategy is being thankful and being grateful, goes such a long way. And, you're not on a high horse. You're not better than your audience. You're not better than your buyers. You're not better than your peers. And be grateful that people can have a career in Instagram magic. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, right. Yeah, welcome to the future.
Exactly. You could come up with a deck of cards and it can get kickstarted by strangers. Like, people on the other side of the world can be like, yeah, that looks cool. I want that. Like, just this world that we're living in right now is incredible. And, a lot of people feel the struggle of the growth on like some of these platforms, and just to think about it as how lucky we are to even be able to use them. How many famous magicians were there 100 years ago? Yeah. How many thriving or working magicians were there, or creators were there 100 years ago? We're just in such a fantastic time of surplus that we should enjoy.
Yeah, and there's when, even as you say that, right, that my friend X had a really good way of putting this. There's room enough for all of us. It's a big, wide open world, and it's only just getting started. I know it feels like sometimes it's saturated, but I promise you, I was doing magic on and off for 27 years, and it really didn't pick up until about 4 years ago. Right.
Yeah.
And even then, if we talk about like social media, it took me 2 years. It took me 2 years to get to 10,000 followers. Right. And the day that happened, it was on my birthday. My twin brother and I, we were out for sushi in Pasadena, and we like jumped up and were hugging each other because I had finally, you hit 10,000 and you feel like people are taking you seriously, right? I hit 20,000 6 months later, because now it's starting right now it's starting to like kick in because your followers are now suggesting you and stuff like that. So if you're but for those first 2 years, it was nice. There was good growth, but it was, if we were talking about massive social media following, I was just crickets. It was all quiet on my Western Front. There wasn't anything going on. So, if someone is going to go into this, you've got this balance, right? You've got to be patient enough to let things play out, but not rest on that, not say, oh, it'll hit, not become delusional in that, that's dangerous. That's the thing. Like, oh yeah, no, it'll hit. I'll just keep, slogging away at it. You really have to be active and watch what you're doing and see how it's playing out. So anyway,
and look at the numbers. Anyways, I think that's incredible advice, especially for young people trying to get it going, which is just keep creative, keep consistent, and keep going. Right. Now we're arriving at the end of the episode, but don't worry, there's still plenty more of it. We have a ridiculous amount of closing questions, so don't let the speed of my talking affect the speed of your answering. Take all the time you need, but we have a whole bunch of random last bit
wrap
questions.
Wrap up. Okay, so here we go.
The first is basically you have my audience's ears for the next 30 seconds. You can ask them a question.
Your time starts now. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
You can ask them a question. Any question that you would want, whether you want to hear their opinion or you want them to reach into their brain, any sort of question. What do you want to ask a bunch of magicians?
Let's see. For a bunch of magicians, I would say, what is it that still makes you feel that magical moment? I've always been intrigued by the, for me, it's like watching Garrett Thomas. Garrett Thomas will always like freak me out, right? But I've always been intrigued on like when other magicians still feel like, I make this joke, when they still feel like a muggle, right? They still feel like, oh man, they no longer have grips on reality, even if they knew what the Matrix was, right?
I mean, I'll tell you, the last time that I felt that was at Derek Delgadio's show. Oh boy.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh boy, was that a banger?
Okay.
But that's a great question, and I'm very excited to see what the Discourse in Magic world has to say about it. And on the note of sending out messages into the world, basically, if my count is correct, this has about a million.
Usually
a million
we
listeners on every
magicians.
epised. So now that you've got a million people listening, I mean, usually you're just used to your tiny Instagram following, but now that you have a million magicians listening, is there any PSA, anything that you want to tell them? We've had everything from stop doing this to start doing this. Anything? Is there anything you want to tell the world of magic?
I would say, don't give up on that Ferrari.
I think that's great.
I think we're facing a lot of challenges, and I think you're going to hear a lot of arguments. Magic ebbs and flows in terms of public interest. I don't give up on that like moment. That's why I'm so curious about it, is because I'm always intrigued in finding out how people are kind of preserving it. So I would say keep fighting for it, even if it seems like, technology is belittling it or the arguments are making it seem like it's bitter or rancid. It's not. It's like I said, there's room enough for all of us, and there's room enough for creativity, and that if you have the chance, be yourself and then watch it flourish, right? The world has enough people trying to copy the greats. Just become a great yourself.
That's absolutely awesome advice. And one of the things that I forgot to mention earlier when you said there's enough room in this for all of us is one of the first blog posts I made for this podcast was all of the magic podcasts that exist in the world. And people would send me emails just telling me that I'm crazy. Like, why would I be sending people to other magic podcasts when I'm trying to get people to like mine? And I'm like, you know what? Listen, when I found every magic podcast I went, holy crap, this exists. So let me just be valuable. Let me just do the service. If people like what I do, they'll be a part of it. If they don't, whatever. So I definitely like the approach of going after, having goals and going after them. And if it's for magic, that in-person magic, if that goal is that Ferrari moment, that impossible moment. That I love the way you said it when you said you're walking through 9 3/4. Like, just so, like, every magic metaphor you can think of, we all know what that moment is, and if that's your goal, there's enough work out there to keep working at it and to fight for that. So I definitely think that is
that was very well said.
Really, really good section. Oh, thank you so much. We have a few last parts. Okay. The first is the favorite parts of the episode. So one of the things that we do is, we've been talking for about an hour or so, and people probably washing dishes, driving cars, washing cars, driving dishes, and we want to really distill one important moment or one important take home so that they can have something to think about, maybe something to take action on right away. So we go one at a time, each of us. For me, I was really moved by you talking about the experience of making that deck of cards. And I just think that we all have this opportunity to put that sort of passion and meaning and stuff into our projects. Like, we can, if we have an incredible experience, we can think about how our projects reflect that or relate that, or just how that makes them important to us. So just the idea of putting everything into your project, whether that's, something special about your father, or something special about an experience you had with other magicians, or just really putting yourself into everything. And that, that message seemed to come up over and over again, especially with the Instagram, about, not phoning it in and just really, really trying. So just putting your heart into everything. I think that's a good approach and a good little take home message from this. Tyler, what about you?
It's something we've brought up on the podcast before, but I think it's a point that is worth mentioning again. I really was inspired by the idea of how you sort of shaped your Instagram presence by the restrictions of Instagram and the restrictions that you set for yourself. So this idea that boxing yourself in helps breed creativity is something we mention a lot. I also really enjoyed the idea of using the contrapositive to the science and technology quote. I think that's super valuable and something really worth thinking about. Jeremy, what about you?
I would say that it's definitely, the idea of, what we had discussed in terms of always sort of interacting with the world that you're in, that you're not doing this alone. You're not doing it in a bubble. Right, that there is, like you said, room enough for all of us to interact. You brought up a really good point in terms of, like, you give credit to other magic podcasts and everything, but that doesn't diminish yours. It grows, like, right. All boats are rising, and you're helping in that. Yeah. I think that's a very, very important thing. It's possible to be both competitive and grateful.
Yeah, and magic is thriving right now. So let's all ride the wave together. People ask me about, just to go on a small tangent, people say, like, what did you think of Now You See Me?
Right.
And I say to them, as a movie, in terms of a plot, I thought it was terrible. In terms of the fact that there's magic in pop culture, I'm ecstatic. Right. I'm ecstatic about it. I'm ecstatic that people ask me what I think of a magic movie. The fact that I don't like it doesn't matter. There's magic on people's minds. Like, this is great. So it's the same thing with, like, magic is, like, more people are going to do cooler stuff than I'm doing on Instagram. Other people are going to release audio quotes from their magic podcast on Instagram. Great. Maybe more people will like that, I don't worry. And I teach on this podcast and on articles about how I book my gigs, specifically how I book it at summer camps. Am I worried someone's going to steal my summer camps? No, let them do whatever they want. Like I'm just here to teach, share everything, and just, there's enough room in all of it for all of us. Or sort of, even if you are competition, like, there's still enough room in all of it for all of us.
Because if you've ever been to a magic convention, all these guys who are, like, going head to head, we're all sitting around a table jamming and drinking coffee together. Like, we don't hate each other. Like, this is,
There you go.
So.
Yeah, and it's
a shared love for magic, right?
Exactly.
The next thing in our wrap-up section, we only have 2 more parts, is we want this podcast to go on forever. So in order to do that, we need more guests. And every week we ask our guest who they think we should interview next. So,
and actually, by the way, you were a recommended guest from who was it? Who just did
Mirza?
No, it was Gaff Guy.
Jeremy Hanrahan. Yeah, the world's
all the Jeremy.
We're everywhere. We're slowly taking over. That's what.
Jeremy's relating to each other. Sorry, I just wanted to interject to just mention every time we have someone who was a recommended guest.
Yeah, we gotta make note of that. Not only were they recommended, but who recommended them.
Exactly. Endless chain.
So yeah, is there anybody you think we should interview? The only caveat being you have to be able to give us their email or some sort of contact information.
That seems reasonable. Let me see here. I definitely think that you should interview Demian, the guy.
Demian. Oh yeah. He's on America's Got Talent right now, and
I've recommended him before. I think his story is as intriguing as his presentations, and I think people need to know.
I'm down. If you can connect us, I've been following his material for a little while, and that would be an awesome guy to bring on the podcast.
I can definitely do that. The other person would be David Bonfadini, the Magic Crasher. I think again, I think the story is just as intriguing. And then I would say Asad Chaudhry, 52 cards.
Oh, right.
I think.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. So those
are three fantastic. Usually people give us one, but you've done your work in keeping this podcast alive. I think so. Thank you for that. And the final thing, which I do think in the process of this episode we've done a pretty good job of mentioning them all. But is there anything that you want to plug? Aside from just straight up following you on Instagram, which everybody should do, and you can plug your Instagram and any product.
You know what? I would say if you guys enjoyed Instagram, my world in terms of my interaction with the Magic world is actually pretty limited. So it's 2 decks of cards and 2 downloads. And I spent a lot of time I'm very, very big into small things that have a huge impact. So both of my downloads talk about that. But any support you want to throw out that way, I don't make a dime off of it. All of those go toward the people who helped me create them. And I would love for you to support what they did for me. So there's, the 2 decks of cards Vitreous through RE Handcrafted and the Royal Reserves through Illusionist. And then my download, the BC Shuffle through Lost Art Magic, and the Instagram sessions through Magic Stream through Illusionist.
Awesome. That is absolutely awesome. And I'll just mention to everybody at home who might be crazy enough to not be following you on Instagram, it's lost_Angelus, Angelus, and you all should know how to spell lost. So there you go. Definitely follow Jeremy. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming on the episode and telling us all of your inner Instagram secrets and basically everything that we wanted to know about Magic. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was an absolute blast.
Absolutely. And of course, a big, huge thank you to the people at home for tuning in. Congrats. You did a good job. It's about an hour and you didn't learn any tricks. You learned the important stuff. So congrats to you guys. And we will see you all next Thursday.
Take care, everybody.
Well, boom. There's episode 77 with Jeremy Griffith. Definitely go follow him on Instagram, lost_Angelus, LOST_ANGELUS. Probably one of the coolest Magic Instagram accounts out there, aside from Discourse and Magic, of course. And just a reminder to go check out 4gigsin4days.com. It's totally free. I'm going to teach you in 4 days how to book 4 gigs. And yeah, it all starts on October 3rd. Make sure you've signed up before then because we're all going to do it together. It's going to be awesome. And yeah, thanks for being a part of it. See ya Thursday.